Hey, this is Dustin, and today I'm going to compare the Ikon and the Epic passes. So, the reason I'm doing this review is because this morning I got a notification on my phone saying that Vail is going to be buying out Peaks Resorts. This deal is still pending, so there's a chance that it won't go through, but this review is assuming that Vail will have merged with Peaks Resort by the winter of 1920. Before I go any further, I'll just let you guys know what Vail is actually buying. So Peaks has currently 3 mountains in New Hampshire: Attitash, Crotched, and Wildcat. They have several in Pennsylvania, including Jack Frost Big Boulder, Liberty Mountain, Round Top Mountain, and Whitetail Resort. They also have Mount Snow in Vermont, Hunter in New York, and they have Alpine Valley, Boston Mills, Brandywine, and Mad River Mountain in Ohio. So I live on the East Coast, just outside of New York City, and my review will mostly be focused on people like me who live on the East Coast, maybe in New York or Boston, and take a couple trips out west per year, but have a lot of flexibility with that. Obviously, this is going to vary depending on where in the country you live. If you don't live on the East Coast, this merger is not really probably going to change your decision on whether you buy an Epic or an Ikon pass. Also, I'm going to be comparing the full passes. I'm not going to look at the ones with blackout dates and limited mountains because I don't think these passes were as good of a deal, and they probably won't work for most people who work a normal job. The Ikon pass costs $10.50 and the Epic is $9.39. So I don't think the price difference on this is going to be the deciding factor for most people. It's going to be about the destinations that are available and the number of days at each spot. There are other East Coast passes that you should look into, like the Ski 3 or the New Hampshire Pass, but these are the two major national and global passes that also include a lot of mountains on the East Coast that most people are probably going to be looking at if they're going to leave the East Coast and want to have mountains on their pass. This is probably the most major shakeup in the East Coast ski pass scene that we've seen since Max Pass went away 2 or 3 years ago. In addition to the Peaks resorts that I already mentioned, the Epic Pass offers Stowe, Vermont, Mount Sunapee, New Hampshire, and Okemo, Vermont on the East Coast. These three have unlimited days. Other highlights of the Epic Pass are all the Colorado resorts, which there are a lot of good ones. Whistler, you also have a few in Tahoe, California, and you have Park City, Utah. So these are all probably solid destinations to go on a week-long trip out west if you're from the East Coast, or certainly if you live near one of these mountains, the Epic Pass is something to consider pretty strongly. Epic Pass also has some resorts in the U.S. that are a limited number of days, so you get 7 days at Telluride, 7 days each at Sun Valley and Snow Basin in Idaho and Utah. Also 7 days total in the Canadian Rockies at 6 different resorts up there, so I guess you get 1 day each, but I guess that could be a fun road trip, or if you're only going to one, then you can stay there for the whole time. Epic Pass also gives you 5 days each at 11 different resorts in Japan and access to 22 European resorts. Ikon Pass gives you unlimited skiing at 14 destinations. Only 2 of them are in the Northeast, and they are Tremblant, Quebec, and Stratton, Vermont. Also, you have Snowshoe, West Virginia, which is, I guess, in the Southeast, and Blue Mountain, Ontario, which is a little bit more towards central Canada. Also, there are quite a few resorts in Colorado, California, one in Washington, and one in Utah. Many of the Ikon Pass destinations have day limits, so it's usually 7 days, and sometimes it's 7 days for different resorts that are close to one another and probably owned by the same company. So you get 7 days total at all of Aspen Snowmass's 4 resorts combined, Also, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and Big Sky, Montana are probably highlights of different really fantastic resorts that'll give you 7 days at each, which is definitely enough for a trip to either one of those. In the Northeast, you get 7 days combined at Killington Pico. I really like going to Killington early and late season because they open before anyone else and close after anyone else. They also have 7 days at Sugarbush, Vermont, and 7 days each at Sunday River, Maine, Sugarloaf, Maine, and Loon, New Hampshire. There certainly are very good options for trips out west on either pass, although I think that the Ikon Pass has a slight edge just because of places like Jackson Hole, Big Sky, and Snowbird, as well as Aspen if that's what you're into. But you can certainly take several really good trips out west on the Epic Pass, places like Telluride, Crested Butte, and plenty of other options. So either way, I think if you live on the East Coast and you're going to take 1 or 2 trips out west this year, I think you should be fine with either pass. The main reason I haven't considered the Epic Pass in previous years is because of lack of good ski areas close to my house that I could do a day trip at. Although they have Stowe, which is a very solid mountain that I like very much, and Okemo, which is pretty close but not really my favorite. I think that this edition of the Peaks Passes resorts really changes the game. Epic Pass will offer the only really close skiing to New York City in Jack Frost Big Boulder and Hunter Mountain. While I think Jack Frost Big Boulder are the closest destinations to New York, I probably wouldn't go there for a day trip just because they're pretty small and relatively much worse than places further north. Although I think if you live in Philadelphia, this pass is much more attractive because of these places that you can go for a day trip, especially if you're still learning how to ski or want to work on your park skiing or want to go after work even. Hunter Mountain is a decent day trip if it's a little bit off peak and it won't be too crowded. I think the new addition of the new lift last year will help with some of the congestion, but still, it's a pretty tough place to ski for most people who don't want to be bogged down by all the crowds. There are some definitely good times to be had there on weekdays or off season like in March, but I would definitely try to avoid this place on holiday weekends or even normal weekends in February. Also, Mount Snow is pretty close and definitely day trippable. Also, they added some good week-long trips or long weekend trips in Attitash and Wildcat up in New Hampshire. It'd be cool to stay somewhere in between and get a little bit of both of those mountains over a long weekend or even a week-long trip. Ikon Pass definitely has better mountains in the Northeast overall, I would say, although there's nothing that's super close like Pennsylvania and New York. Everything they have is either in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, or Canada. So you're not really going to be able to drive to anything that's less than 3.5 hours away. So you got Killington, which is a really good spot to go off peak as long as it's not on a weekend where it's too crowded. It's a good place to go spring skiing, and I do that pretty much every year. They also have Sugarbush, which is pretty much a top-notch ski area on the East Coast as far as I'm concerned. It's very big and there's a lot of different stuff going on. There's Loon, which I probably will not go to just because it's very far and it's not a huge place with great terrain. It might be a good spot to go up on the way to Sunday River and Sugarloaf. And those are 2 spots that would definitely be worth, going up for a week and doing a more extended trip there. Also, Tremblant in Quebec is an awesome spot to go for a week. The village there is really cool and the skiing is actually pretty decent. It's like almost a whole nother country up there because it's in French Canada and it's a really interesting spot just to go hang out for a few days. Stratton Mountain is also on the Ikon Pass for unlimited. I would definitely not recommend this mountain for anyone except for maybe like moms who want to complain. I've had like pretty bad times at this mountain. It's really flat, really crowded in general, and like there's way too many condos and way too much uphill capacity. It's just crowded, long lift lines, and pretty bad terrain. Like I said in the beginning of this video, there's a chance that this deal with Peaks and Epic Vail Resorts will not go through. And the main reason for this is antitrust. I think the US government is finally catching on to what we've already known for a long time, that Vail Resorts is becoming a monopoly. And the ski industry needs competition. Although this pass is pretty cool because you can go anywhere in the country and ski, it's still hampering competition, and I think healthy competition is necessary. They're taking out one of the main passes on the East Coast and just absorbing it. So this is something to watch. I think it will go through ultimately, but Vail's days of buying up major ski corporations may be slowing down, if not coming to an end. In conclusion, I think that I will probably be purchasing an Ikon pass, although it is a very tough decision, and before today I hadn't really even considered the Epic Pass as a viable option. But I think that the quality of resorts in the Northeast, except for Stowe on the Epic Pass, is better on the Ikon Pass, and even though I'm going to have to drive probably an extra hour to 2 hours for each trip as compared to, the Pocono spots, Hunter, and Mount Snow, I think that'll be worth it to have better days for me. But like, the Epic Pass is literally right there. It's a very tough decision, and I think that I just want to get the pass because I already planned a couple of trips around going there. I'm doing a trip to Tremblant and also a trip to Sugarloaf. So those are pretty much planned out. Next year, I may seriously consider the Epic Pass because there are a decent amount of good mountains in the Northeast. Not quite as many, and there's also quite a few small mountains that'll be easy to get to for a short day trip with not too much driving.